Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Double Book. Today's guest is the conjurer of soul magic, the architect of great dragons, and the mind behind a novel that takes grimdark fantasy and wields it with arcane punk grit. His book, A Dragon of the Veil, launches the Warriors of Spirit and Bone series where faith is fractured and politics bleeds into religion. Please welcome the one, the only Nick Snape. How are you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing great. I don't know how I can follow that introduction, but thank you
Oh,
very much.
you're gonna kill it. You're gonna kill it. Well, I'm super excited to have you on, Nick. I've been patiently waiting for this conversation for a while now. Definitely since I finished your book, I have a lot of questions. Really, I want to pick your brain a lot during this conversation on how you came up with some of the dynamics and the some of the specifics within this story. But for those that aren't familiar with your work, do you mind going through and just giving a quick elevator pitch for your stories?
Well, elevate for the whole stories. Basically, my approach has always been character-driven action approach. So the things I write, whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, will have strong character, character interaction in particular. I want them to feel real, lived in, that's how I approach every book that I write. And on top of that, we're looking to have that action level that kind of like keeps a roll. So I look at all my books like a roller coaster. You start off with a bit of a, oh, it's coming. We have that first dip, and then we start going climbing higher and higher until we get to that culmination at the end, and then we have the as we rail off towards the end of the book. And that's how I write those books. They're in the I think you used the word with me earlier, cadence, and there's a cadence there to everyone, and
Mhm.
I try and style it in that way. So we're going to higher and higher peaks until we crash down.
Awesome.
So that's my style in terms of all the books I write, whether it's sci-fi, in terms of military sci-fi, whether it's the space operas I write, whether it's the individual standalones, but especially in the Warriors of Spirit and Bone books, that's essential,
Mm-hmm. So when did you first realize?
particularly when you
Oh,
book.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You
Yeah,
keep going. You keep going,
that's
Nick.
right. No, no, it's fine. It's okay.
So when did you first realize that storytelling was something new you wanted to pursue?
Oh, well, I have an odd history, so I've talked about it before, but basically, um, I wrote my first book probably 23, 24. That was on an old Amstrad, if you remember those, which is tucked somewhere away, miles away from here now. The book has been under a bed, probably rotted away. But that was my first attempt at writing. And basically, I had a build up in terms of my interest in what I read from about 17, 18, which
Mhm.
started off with sci-fi, then slipped into fantasy with Tolkien, and then moved on to Michael Moorcock, who's probably been my biggest influence, and then stopped. So I read, but I ended up being a teacher, then being particularly early years. So in terms of my literary journey, I've read and told stories in particular now for 30, 35 years. I did once work out how many stories I'd told. It was somewhere around 25, 26,000 stories I'll have read to children along the way. And I can't do that in any other way than make them excited about the words, about the language. So that kind of been my seed to keep going. And that was my that build up towards shall I give it a go again? Shall I go and sit down and write something? And then of course we had COVID, which in terms of schools is an odd thing. The UK schools were shut down, but then reopened at the same time, trying to educate children at home. I worked and became head of a primary school, so that's 3 to 11-year-olds, but also with support for children with autism. So we had a particular unit, and those children were still in school, but suddenly in a very strange position. So after all that passed through, which was a difficult time in the UK, how it was dealt with. You then had to go on and then restart the school, restart the feeling of it, bringing all the kids back together. And after that was done, I realised I was done. I think I'd burnt out all the giving, all the work for everyone else, and walked away very proud of what we'd done, very proud of where the children were and came up after COVID. But at that point, I realised I need to do something for myself, and that's when I realised um, let's try the writing again. So I basically I took early retirement, but gave myself 3 months, write a book, give it a go, and then see what happens from there. And now it's 2.5 years later, still
Awesome.
going.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is so cool. Um, so you mentioned Tolkien and you said Morlock as some inspirations. Is there any other authors that inspires your the type of stories you like to write or the tone that you like to have within your story? There are other authors that kind of inspire you, and it doesn't have to be authors. Maybe even something in other entertainment industry. It could be movies, TV shows as well. Just any other things that go through and inspire you.
I think it's what you grow up with. For me, those are the things that you form early in your mind. So we mentioned Michael Moorcock as a prolific author, and I'll come back to him when we get onto the Warriors books. But also, I was very influenced by the UK Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon TV. So we were the people that had the black and white Flash Gordons. We were the ones that had the Space 1999. We had the Battlestar Galacticas. We had all those types of shows, which were always shown probably usually in the UK in the wrong order. But actually, they were the type of inspiration for me in terms of what I grew up with. That was the real interest that I had in terms of serialization and that tune in next week, folks type approach. So that had an influence on how I wrote, particularly the first series that I wrote, to make sure that you had that closure at the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But also there was that overriding story that you could then flow through and then you could keep going. So I was really influenced by that. Obviously, I was the Star Wars child from '76 and '77, so I had all of that going on in terms of interest and inspiration as well. On top of that, so those things all have played into where I've gone in terms of the interest I have in reading. And then I think I went through, and I go through bursts when I read. So I go through interest in terms of that sci-fi type B movie approach or serialization approach. I read a lot for a couple of years during that period, during a period of time, and then I'll go on to fantasy. And then fantasy will be something that I'll look for something in terms of richer type approaches. So I swing, and that I think has influenced the fact that I move from series to series. Often they have a slightly different tone or a slightly different approach because I've done that. I'll go back to it, but I need that break now to go and try something else.
Wow. So you mentioned a few things, and I'm really curious before we lean back into your writing style. It seems like you have a lot of interest, which is awesome. Is there a hobby or an interest that you have that is completely unrelated to writing that you're super nerdy or passionate about?
I can say what I'm super terrible about. So I love mountain biking. I'm not very good at it. I used to fall off an awful lot until I stopped doing the rougher tracks. And so where I live, which is central England in Peak District, we have quite a few areas that are around my level in terms of skill. But I love getting out on the bike, and I love actually the challenge of doing something which see if I can actually stay on this time. And also in terms of fitness and everything else that goes with it, but just being out. So I'm really passionate about mountain biking. I've always enjoyed it. I go out a couple of times a week, not so much just lately. I've done a lot more walking as well on top of that. But those are the things in terms of getting out into the cliche, isn't it? The countryside, we're getting out into the hills and just seeing something that takes your mind off. You don't have to think. You don't have to, you stop mulling about your stories. You stop mulling about the bills, all the other things that are going on. You can actually just be in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my two biggest things in terms of interest.
Love it. Yeah, that's one thing that I always watch people go through and do. Nothing that I feel like I would get hurt so fast if I did mountain biking. I feel like I would fall pretty much immediately when it comes to those things. Like I've seen videos and I've seen people like we like going through and hiking. And I see them riding through the woods, and I'm like, nothing
Yeah.
like very very cool. Nothing I can go through and even imagine doing because I'd be out way too quickly, way too fast. But
I,
that's awesome.
yeah. I mean,
That's so cool.
yeah. Those are the things I liked doing, but I'm not. You know, you get to the point, especially. I mean, you get to a certain point where breaking something actually counts. You start getting older and start realizing, hey, maybe I shouldn't be risking all of that because there are consequences beyond just somebody else looking after me. So yeah, I've calmed down a lot. Had a big off a year ago, year and a half ago. Hurt my shoulder. And I think from that point, it's like, no, calm yourself down.
Yeah, I
You're
gotta
getting
slow it
old.
down. Gotta slow it down a little bit.
Yeah,
um, so let's get
want a break.
into a Dragon of the Veil. I really enjoyed this story. It felt like it was wild. It was very original. Where did you get the idea for this story? Was it a character? Was it the world? Was it a question you were trying to answer? How did you go through and come up with a Dragon of the Veil?
It's like everything to do with writing. It's always complex. So, in terms of seeds of idea, when I wrote the Weapons of Choice books, the original idea that was in my head was to do some was a Dragon of the Veil. I didn't think I had, whereas the Weapons of Choice books are different in style, so they're not as complex in terms of storyline. Um, they're good; they sell really well, but they're not as complex in terms of a fantasy storyline where you're trying to pull in things that have got to be contained within, 3 books. There are threads everywhere. So basically, I had took the idea of I wanted that. We talk about parties, don't we, and how D&D works and everything else, and you've got 3 or 4 characters that are
Mhm.
interacting. I wanted to have that, but not have that. I wanted those people to be thrust together, not necessarily knowing each other, to have their own foibles. And I needed them also to be not perfect. I can't deal with perfect characters.
Mhm.
We're not. We've been through life. We've got life. We carry our baggage with us. And though I want it to be escapism, I want the story to be the escapism, um, to be thrust into that situation, but them to be relatively ordinary people. So none of my characters are actually, they haven't got any superpowers, they're not superhuman, but they must have or be engaged with something that elevates them from into that position. So what I took from the weapons of choice idea was there is a weapon in those books that runs all the way through the weapons of choice, which changes. So it manipulates, it changes into whatever you need at that point in time. Limited. So you could,
Mhm.
so you may need a sword, you may need a shield, you may need a bow. It will do those things. It will change to those. But it's not the ultimate weapon in terms of that. It still has a very limited amount of power. So I wanted to give them something that made them feel special, connected with each other, but also they could argue about and how they worked. So it was those 2 ideas that came together. And then the last thing I wanted was to have a situation where the people involved in the story didn't have Scooby Doo about what was really going on. So not a clue about what was happening. So in terms of the world, and you've read A Dragon of the Veil, so you'll know that the actual people there are being controlled by a religion that's written down in scripture that they are expected to adhere to. It's not fully seen through. People can voluntarily walk away from it, but they have basically 7 gods that they can go and worship, and they are encouraged to go and do so. And that's I wanted that scripture that was written to be the how they lived their lives, and for that scripture to be a lie. It was so that whatever was controlling them was happening, and so in terms of that engagement, the reader then is thrust into that world and then must learn as the people learn, maybe a bit quicker because I do change point of views, but I don't want it to be bang, you know everything, and this is how
Mhm.
then the story carries out. I wanted it to be a seep. a gentle entrant element being introduced, and then you find that's been flipped on its head, and then something else, and you find that's been flipped on its head. And I think I needed that. I can't. People have told me that the second chapters can be a little bit too much information, but I can't deal overall with you knowing everything bang immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted that to emerge over the books, and it's not just in book one. There are more layers in book 2 and book 3 as well. So I think though once I got those concepts in my head, I knew where I was going. But that's, you're pulling a lot of threads with that to have an entire people discovering that they've been lied to. Then you've got the puppet type royalty that then realize that they've been lied to, and then that starts to emerge, and then they realize some of the atrocities that the religion have engaged with, that they didn't necessarily have to. But it's all part of that learning process of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's the drip feed that goes on through the books. Yeah. That's why it took 2 years to write.
So from a story arc perspective, so I'm really curious, how many books, so I've only read the first one, and I know you have 3 books out.
That's it.
How many books in the series? Is it concluded after 3? Is it a trilogy, or do you plan on more books after this, the third one?
So it's a trilogy.
It is a trilogy.
The story arc, so the story arc that starts with the first soul tear, so the first emergence of magic that people are aware of. That's from that moment through to the end of that's all resolved by the end of the third book. So you go through book 1. In book 2, you meet the main antagonists, and then you experience them through 2 and 3. Then there's the final confrontation, and at the end of that final confrontation, you've got a world that's been through an awful lot, and that's where the story ends. So there is the possibility that I can do some novellas around the emergence of how they ended up where they did on Brandshold. There are possibility I could do a follow-up story from where they are at the end of book 3, but they're nowhere near essential, and I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to do those, whether it would actually add to, because it must add to the story. Otherwise, it's not something I'll go in that direction. So really, it's with the third book now out. It's only been out 3 weeks. It's getting reader feel from that and how people are with it and how it ends, to see if it needs to have a next step to it. It could, but certainly that story ends there. Everything you expect to be resolved is resolved.
Awesome, good. That makes me feel good. I always like stories that like have a clear ending. Don't get me wrong, I love a story, like I like the books that are like, hey, there's 20 books in the series, like, okay, but does it end at 20, or is it a never ending type of story? I like to know what I'm getting myself into when it comes to books, movies, TV, like in general, like any kind of entertainment. I like to know, like, hey, you get a clear story within these. So that's amazing. That's awesome. For this series. I'm really curious, and if you could elaborate on your thought process for this series. Did you go through and have every beat of the story figured out of where you wanted to go with this, or was it just, hey, I know where I'm ending, let's kind of take the journey together with my characters to figure out how we're going to get to that? And you're really trying to figure out, are you a planner or are you a pantser? I think that's what it's called, a pantser.
Yeah. For this series, I'm a planster, somewhere in between. And I've had this discussion a lot with different people in terms of outside the not interviews, but in terms of discussions about how we approach stuff. So I am by nature a pantster. So I am by nature, I'll have a single piece of A4 with the notes of the story written down that I'm aiming for, with the beats in my head, and then the characters take me where they will. And that's how all the books have been written in the Weapons of Choice series. It's how they've been written in the Wrecking Squad series. But what happens is that once you've started those beats, you add a bit more, and then that A4 becomes 2A4, and it becomes 3A4, so that you can keep the threads together depending on the complexity of the story. So with the Dragon of the Veil, It was the structural plan for how things were going to happen emerged during halfway through book one. So I had the Panster idea, I had the characters, and it's where that moment when you begin to realize actually you've got all these threads, and you said it, you want the book to end. And if that series hasn't got the threads sewn up by the end of book three, then I've not done my job. So that's how I looked at it, that I wanted every single one of those threads done. So from that point, I realized I needed to actually have a little bit more of a plan. And so that's where I started structuring the beats out. So I wouldn't say I went further than the beats, but it's the character beats I did. So basically, I went through all the different elements, the introduction of the antagonist in book two, the influence of the last chapter, which I'm sure was hopefully came as a wow moment. That was the point of that last chapter, to actually and parallel their stories, and then you began to add in the main characters, so Lao, Sora, Wisin, to make sure that their story went alongside that as well, and that you were still engaged with what's happening to them. And then I had Queen Erin, as you know her, but she ends up as Queen Vista by the end of the books, because she stops being the puppet and becomes much more a main character as things go along. Not giving anything away. I mean, the last book's called A Queen in Blood. There's a hint. So it became a point where actually the beats had to be written by character rather than by story, and that's where I changed. So normally I have all that character interaction and conversations. I have conversations in my head while I'm writing between the characters. Oddly enough, so that's more than one voice at once. But for this one, still had that chapter by chapter, but the beats were in. And I did that through chapter structure, chapter swaps between the different POVs. And there are some extra points of view that come in during book two as well. And I had some interesting characters in two and book three that had depth to the political side and to the action side of things, because there's a war coming.
So I want to lean in a little bit more to Dragon of the Veil. I love the title. I love the cover. I think they're fantastic. But for the name, A Dragon of the Veil, it's very intriguing. Do you mind going into a little detail on how you came up with that title?
I think there was a necessity. So if we go back to Michael Moorcock. So Moorcock wrote the Eternal Champion series, which is a huge series, but with different characters around the balance between law and chaos. So the Eternal Champion ran through those books, and not always willingly, not always knowingly, was the person that was in the middle of that, the crux of those balances going on. And they were written in terms of realms, so places. So you can imagine them as planets, if you like, but more it's like a place that has a similar timeline to where you are. It may have a different situation, different things going on. So, and basically, what I wanted was the ability to move between these realms, and that's where I think people often talk about my book being fantasy sci-fi rather than fantasy itself. So to get between those veils, to slip between those places, if you like, the curtain between each realm, you needed something that can actually travel between those. So that's where that came up from. The veils are there and built in some to protect particular places. They're made more powerful by the people involved, particularly the Seven Gods' houses, to do with Brandhold, where the main story is. The dragons have the ability to slip between those veils, and that's where they've developed. Now they're a lot more complex there in terms of how they are and what they are than what you see in book one. You get more understanding as you go through the books about what's actually happened to them. Because we're introduced to them, and everyone knows that there's mechanical dragons in the story, so they're artificed, if you like, clockwork, and they wouldn't function without soul magic. Simple as that. They may look like they should, but there isn't petrol in there. There isn't gas. There isn't explosive. It's run on magic. So it's, if you like, and that's what arcane punk is. It's that fusion between technology and magic at a certain level. So those creatures are powered by particular things that have abilities to support the slipping between the veils. So they're spirit magicians or shamans, and so but they're not how they should be. They've been twisted. They've been poisoned. I don't want to go into how they've been poisoned because that's really important in book 2. But they what controls those dragons has been twisted and poisoned by their main antagonist, who you get to meet in book 2. So it's if you like, a machine that can take you from one realm to another, but it's a thinking machine. It has its own spirit, if you like. It's possessed by its own spirit. Poisoned one.
So I want to lean in a little bit with the dragons.
Yep.
I'm going to be very honest. It was one of my favorite parts of the story. The story is great, but I love the originality of the dragons. And I'm really curious how you came up with the idea. How do you develop this concept of going, this is kind of what I want to do with these dragons? Because it's not anything that I've seen before in regards to people's portrayal of dragons.
I think what I wanted was we've all got the urge to write a dragon book, and they're not the character within the book, but they're very, very important. What I wanted them to have was an awesomeness, like a something different, that something that actually, in terms of thinking about it, is just when you actually put those concepts together. So they needed to be big. In my mind, I wanted them to be clockwork. I wanted that steampunk, arcane punk feel. I wanted them to be built, made, but I also wanted them to have a character. They wanted them to be able to interact and be part of the story rather than just a means to get about or a means to go and kill something or whatever else. So they had to have something within them that made them part of the story, interact, and actually evolve the story as it goes along, and be, in one case, one of those dragons will become a consistent character till the end of the books. One you actually switches role. So it's hard to describe it, really. I wanted something clockwork. I wanted something that epitomized, if you like, the idea of an artificer, somebody who builds things that actually, if you look at them, probably shouldn't work, but you make them work with magic. So a dragon made of metal is going to be far too heavy to fly. We have later on in the second book, we have scorpions, which are basically the vanguard machines. So they're just exactly as they describe. They're a big, huge metal scorpion, and they act as the vanguard for the army, for the main antagonist that you meet later, for the emperor. You have ornithopters, which appear in quite a few different styles of books. So basically, they're planes that flap, and they look like dragonflies. So you're bringing in. I've got mechanical centipedes, but they're huge, that scour the battlefield, searching for souls because they need the souls to feed the magic. So it's the mechanical side of it that I wanted, but I didn't want it to be Transformer style robots that we're talking about. I wanted them to be typical fantasy style things that we remember. See, now I'm describing it. I'm trying to think if it's is it Harry Harrison that used to do the different models for the Sinbad and everything else and the way they used to move. I don't know if that's in my head when I write it, but it's that type of feel to them. But obviously they're too big, they're too bulky, and actually, how other than winding up a spring, how do you get them to move? And that's where the magic element came in.
So I really love the world that you built. I love the setting, and it really does feel like it's a lived-in place. And I really do enjoy having a world where I can feel like I'm there. And you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation that those are the kind of stories you like to tell, but also the kind of stories that you like to read yourself are stories that feel lived in, stories that feel like real people are actually going on in this story, average, normal people. So I'm really curious for your story, for Dragon of the Veil specifically. how much of the world and the setting was done off research and how much was pure imagination?
So it's, and that's the hard part, isn't it? So your imagination comes from from your experiences, your life
Mhm.
experiences, what you've done, what you've been part of. So there will be heavy influences from the people that I've read. I think there's
Mhm.
no doubt about that. Whether it be Michael Moore, whether it be Joe Abercrombie, whether it's John Gwynne. I really love Twilight Rain series by Tom Lloyd.
Hmm.
Really dark, very grim. Not so many people have read it. Please go and read some of Tom Lloyd's work. It's so good. And those things have that influence in terms of, right, it's going to have that grime to it. It's going to have those real people to it. They've got to feel like these could inhabit your world. And once you've got that element to it, I'm losing the thread of my question now. Ask me that again. So
Yeah.
I've got the character side of it.
Yeah. So from a setting and the world perspective, I'm curious, is it mostly
Imagination.
done on research or is it pure imagination? It's like really,
Yeah.
is it based off of this town, this continent, this area, and you did research about it? Or was it more like I'm building something from the ground up to build these characters and how are they going to go through and make money? How they, you know what I mean? Like how much of it was imagination versus, hey, I did research on X, Y, and Z to kind of start building and having that foundation for the world.
So if we go back to the actual structural imagination side of it, there's all that going around in your head when you start thinking
Mm-hmm.
about concepts. But actually, in terms of research, it's not there. With a fantasy world, deliberately, in my point of view, I haven't gone into comparing religions. I haven't gone into comparing how monarchies work. I haven't looked at those structural things. The only thing I really wanted was city states that had come
Mm-hmm.
together to fight one particular. There's a crusade that's happened when the first book starts. And that's what you, in terms of the city states beginning to come together, beginning to form a union, beginning of royalty. That emerged, that just evolved as I wrote the story rather than anything else. But I think in terms of what I wanted to happen, in terms of the research that I did, you're going to look into some of the explosives and things that the ordinary people were devising. Um, One thing we haven't mentioned, obviously, is that there is the religion is very anti-science and
Mm-hmm.
very pro-faith. So in terms of that, it's how far they could push the boundaries. But so I needed to do the research in terms of what's doable, what's actually in physics able to do, what was happening in terms of the type of explosives that were developed in China, however many thousands of years ago, was the first element. How far did that go? So that's the only real research I think I did in terms of linking it all together. You know, what's possible, what levels of science can you merge in, so I could then judge how far the seven gods' houses, High Lord Penance, the Overseer, how far they would allow, how far they would be pushed. Apart from that, it was all in my head, and I think that's probably deliberate. I've done an awful lot of research for some of the other books that I've done in terms of science, in terms of how I want things to work, how things work together. So I think I needed to do something that didn't have that level of research to go with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. I'm even more impressed, to be honest with you, on how you built this world from the ground up. I know it obviously has that historical avenue from other stories you read, but I really loved, again, emphasizing I really love the setting and the world. It really felt lived in. So I just give you your props for that. Um,
Thank you.
for the series as a whole, for those readers who go through and finish the series, what are you hoping that they take away from your story? Is there a feeling? Is there a question you want them to go through and have answered in their mind? Like what are you hoping they take away from your story?
I think it's uh, I've the strap line for the elevator line, if you like, for A Queen in Blood is not all heroes carry swords. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a big thing for me in terms of the story, because they certainly do in the story. But I think it's just turning that around, in terms of not everyone who is a hero is wielding a weapon. Or if they are, that weapon might be the word. It might be their inner strength. It might be their ability to organize. It might be the ability to galvanize people. I really wanted to feel that there isn't just one hero in the book. There isn't just those heroes going to search out for something that they start looking for at the end of book one. It's getting across, actually, that there are layers to that. And I think we talked about the religion, which is important in the book. It sounds
Hmm.
far more important when you talk about it like this than it actually is in the book, because it's
Hmm.
most of the book is around the action and the development stuff. But you have High Lord Penance,
Hmm.
in book one, who I think comes across as quite overbearing, very controlling, very clever, and manipulating everything from the background. Now he as a character goes through all sorts of things in books two and book three. Um, and I wanted that to be there as well, because there's a surety in his behavior in book one. And actually, that surety is, how much of it is real, how much of it is using other people as a crutch, how much
Hmm.
it is using a scripture. And as you emerge, as the truth emerges about why the religion was formed and what's happening and how they're trying to protect the people, really, whoops, um, you get the heroic side of what he's done and the sacrifices he's made, but at the end, he's a completely different feel to him. And I think it's just that I wanted it to be said that people can rise up, people can fall, people can come back. It doesn't matter, if you're the hero with the sword or the hero with the crown. It doesn't matter if you're the person who was 5 minutes ago, insensible on Greenleaf rum, or the person that's been dishonoured. You can still stand up. You can still fight for what's right. It's That was the feeling I wanted to get across in the books.
So
Hopefully, I managed it.
that was the
That was
theme.
the aim.
Yeah, that was the theme you wanted to um,
Yeah.
pass through these stories, is really that anyone can have the opportunity to go through and make a change in the world. Is that kind of why you mentioned at the
Yeah.
beginning how you're not a huge fan of um, the perfect character, that traditional hero of, oh, they were born to be the hero. You like more of the
Yeah.
average person going through and making those choices of their own to go be the hero within the world. Is is there
Yeah.
a reasoning about why you believe that and why you wanted to tell a story that way?
I think that there are. I think we're immersed in stories that way, aren't we? But that is, it's almost the dream of you when somebody writes that story. Are they putting themselves in that place? Is that what they wanted to be? Is that what they wanted to go through?
Hmm.
And they're out there, and there's some brilliant ones. I wouldn't even remotely say that they're not. There is that chosen one is the wrong word, but maybe it's not. There are the chosen ones. There are the ones that emerge. The Tom Lloyd I mentioned before, the character does emerge as almost not a chosen one, but rises because of his birth,
Hmm.
because of what he is. But however, I just wanted it to be ordinary people thrust
Hmm.
into an extraordinary situation, and the choices they made and the sacrifices that happen and the losses that go on. And I want them to feel real, even though magical things are happening, even though spirits exist, even though there's not just an ominous feeling of what's coming, but also those things that are coming have their own reasons for that. They're not
Hmm.
just a tyrannical thing that wants power. It's something that has a purpose and a reason to be doing what it's doing. Can't tell you what it is. That really will spoil the books. Um, it's making sure that every element to that has that, I don't know, it could be you side to it. I also wanted them to be, a little bit older. I didn't want a young adult, feel to it. I didn't want somebody that can suddenly fight. I wanted them to be grizzled. There you go, veterans, not old veterans, but a
Yeah.
veteran part of it, um, that actually have learnt, in blood and in fire what it means to fight and to be at the end of a fight and to lose and to win. I wanted them to have all had those experiences as well, because I think that's also, and that was important in terms of the growth of the characters that happened, because they can still grow, they can heal, and they can still grieve. So
So we have a comment, and I didn't click it. I'm so sorry, Solus. I didn't click it. Solus Eddie, how's it going, man? Appreciate you being here. Solus said book one was great. He really appreciated the depths and the concept of the series, and he loved the rest of the series. We really understand the world and the changes. So it's pretty much everything you've been going through and mirroring or stating within this conversation. So it makes me even more excited to go through and jump into the next two books in the series to kind of really see that the main antagonist of the story and really understand their purpose and their reasoning for why they're doing what they're doing, and then lead into the that final big awesome battle that's going to come up at the end. So yeah, I need to go through and pick those up and get to them, because it was a lot of fun jumping into the first one. So we are at the point of our conversation that I like to call the lightning round. And for those not familiar with this, I like to go through and ask my authors a set of questions. There's about 9-ish questions here where Nick's not supposed to think. He's just supposed to answer the questions off the top of his head. They could be easy, they could be completely random. It's a lot of fun for me. I find it very entertaining. So are you ready, Nick?
yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, no guarantees, but yeah.
All right. We'll start it with an easy one. When you're writing, are you more of a coffee drinker, a tea drinker, or are you an ale kind of guy?
Well, I'm coffee when writing.
Coffee when writing. What's your favorite dragon in fiction outside of yours? Don't cheat and say yours. Favorite dragon.
Smaug.
Oh, yes. I agree. Yes. Okay. A fantasy, I think I know this answer based on our conversations, but it's written down, so I got to ask you. What's a fantasy trope you'd be very happy never to see again?
Oh, no, you see, you're wrong. I've not chosen one. Oh, enemies to lovers.
Oh,
Please.
yeah.
The reason for enemies to lovers, I've had this question before. The reason for enemies to lovers is I already know what's going to happen in the book if that's the trope you're telling me about. So there you go.
So that's one of my least favorites. My least favorite is the farm boy trope. I picking the you can still do the same thing, just don't make him a farm boy. Make him anything else. Anything else that make him, he can be working as a server, he can be working at an inn, he can be a storekeeper. I don't care. But just the farm boy. There's so many farm boys, and I need something else. That's just my
I'll go with that.
That
I'll
one
go with that. I still think
that one gets
I
me.
can understand that.
So, one word to describe a dragon of the Vale.
Arcane punk.
Oh,
It's cheating.
I'm going to blend that together into one word. We'll say one. Well, all right. What's your favorite book you've read so far this year?
Oh, that's not fair. Right. We Men of Ash and Shadow is the one I've most recently read that really came home, and I'm going to forget the person's name. H.L. Tinsley. And it's a cheat again because there's two books, one after the other, that I listened to. Excellent.
Okay.
Gaslamp, Low Fantasy. Very, very good.
All right. This one's my favorite one. I ask all authors this one. I love this one. So if you need to think about this one, you can think about this one. If Dragon of the Vale, just book one, had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh, I can't do that. No. Do you know when you've got a song in your head and you just can't pull it out? Right. So, Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, Beat the Devil's Tattoo is the one that's in my head, but it's not the one I'd choose. I'll try and remember the title before we finish.
All
The one I
right.
would choose.
Sounds good. I love that one. Um, yeah, I appreciate. Thanks for playing along. That was fun. I love that question. It always throws people off guard, and it's like I thought about it
Yep.
one interview, and I said I'm going to always ask this question. It cracks me up because most people don't go through and think of that. They don't go through like they think of actors who could play their characters. They think of um, what kind of medium they were like. But most of the time, people don't think of a theme song, and I find that entertaining. I find
So
it very
I've got the one in my head now that I would go for. So that
awesome.
was a really good one, but I'd go for the Cult She Sells Sanctuary.
Oh
That
yes,
would be my overall. So we just I can see the band. I can see me standing there watching them, but I can't remember the song. I'm there now.
love it. All right, before we jump in, because so I brought it up, and I'm curious now since I said something. But before we jump in, we have an awesome author that jumped on. How's it going, William? Appreciate you being here, buddy. I'm so excited to jump
Hi,
into
William.
William's books. They look so cool, so cool. So super hyped. So I mentioned it, and I'm just curious what your answer is going to be. If Have you thought about if your story could be adapted into um, another type of medium? Now you have all the money, so it's not like you have to worry about how it's going to be paid for, who's going to. You got all that handled. You have it. You won the world's money, and you're going to create your story into a different type of medium. Are you going to pick movies, TV shows? Are you going to do a graphic novel? Have you thought about where you would like a different kind of medium if you had the opportunity for
Yeah.
Dragon Reveal?
Game.
A game.
I just think Soul Magic would be just so good to play with.
Mhm.
And if you think about in terms of the artifice, the mechanical things that are gonna
Mhm.
that are in it now and are coming along, there's a lot of scope for that, and there's a multiple number of characters that can be
That,
gone with it. So yeah, no, I'd go with it. I'd go with a game.
that's
Besides,
awesome.
there are
That's
yeah,
awesome.
and also on top of that, yeah, if you've got multiple realms, which you will come across later on, you've got lots of different ways of expanding on that as well. So yeah, no, I'd go with a computer game.
A computer game. Are you thinking like a game like a free roaming game where it kind of can just people can go
Yeah,
through and just explore the world on their own and do different kind of stories
I
within
would
the
I
world?
would I think I would look to combine it so you could work in terms of you could have parts of that would be quests. There's another word I don't like, but you could have things that you're aiming to achieve that would be linked to the actual books themselves,
Mm-hmm.
whilst within a world that then can be free roaming on top of that. So you can have those activities that you're aiming for. You can have those things they need to achieve. Obviously, you would adapt it, not go completely with the books.
Mm-hmm.
But also because you've got multiple realms, and I've only described 4 or 5, but there can be so many more
Mm-hmm.
that you could add that level of potential with a computer game. So that's where I think I would, yeah, definitely go for that. Lots of expansions you can add, character
Mm-hmm.
classes you can bring in. Yeah,
Yeah. All right. We're going to stick with us a little bit longer because William's in my mind right now. Do you have a certain kind of game or a developer in mind that like, hey, I really like the style of this specific developer, this type of game? I'm just really curious. To be very honest, I've asked this a handful of times, but no one's ever said game, and I'm just really intrigued with this. And I can't agree more. I think this would be a fantastic game. So let's make this happen through putting this out into the universe and make this come up. So yeah, do you have a developer or a style?
well, in style, in terms of approach and everything else, you see, this is where I would fall down. So I haven't gamed now for 25, 30 years. This is something that would need to be bring me back. So that would be open for other people to interpret. I couldn't tell you right now who are the best developers. I couldn't tell you which are the best games. Um, it was my plan. So there you go. This is why it came up in my head. That when I hit retirement and I started writing these books, my mornings will be writing the books, my afternoons will be gaming. It's not happening, is it? Never got that far. So William will probably tell you better than I will.
So, William, if you have an idea of a good one, let us know. Very curious. And then Mark jumped in. I want to say hey to Mark. Hey, Mark, how's it going, buddy? Do not tell me what's going on. I don't want any. I'm watching. The game is being recorded. I'm going to watch it in a few hours. So don't. It's not happening for another few hours, Mark. Don't spoil anything. Mark and I both like the same team, so it's like normally he's one of the main people I go through and talk with during on Sunday, so that's fun. So we finished the trilogy, so we went through and talked about it. That this is just 3 books. What's next on the docket? You know, do you have another series you're currently working on? Is there an idea? Anything that you feel comfortable with sharing with us?
Just to give you the concept, A Queen in Blood was finished and off to the editor in January. I got it back and then re-edited it for the end of March. So basically, end of March was when it was done. So since then, I've been working on a new series, which I've switched to sci-fi because I think that this took a lot out of me. So I'm currently writing the Wrecking Squad series, which is like an Expanse stroke Firefly with a smidge of Aliens type book. And I've written 3 of those since March. So at the moment, so the Wrecking Squad, the Butcher's Folly, and Warmonger's Wrath, which is the one that's latest out. They've been proving really popular, and I've written those taking the hint from the fantasy books. I've written those as a trilogy. So there's 3 books in that series, and then there's a second set of 3 books in that series, which I've started now. So the first set, the aim for those was to be introduced to a crew, much like the Firefly, much like the Expanse, who have their secrets, and they have a dual secret. The first of which is that their background is obviously military. The second of which is that they're deserters, and they stole something precious which is on the ship, which changed their lives. So they've basically been hiding for 3 or 4 years, and they get blackmailed into a job, and that job is very much on a lost ghost ship full of a deadly cargo, shall we say. So that's the first book, how that works, and from there we then get slowly emerging understanding of what really happened on that ship. And by the end of the 3rd book, you completely know what's happened on that ship, all the machinations that's gone on politically behind it all the big players in it. And then we have an emergence of a new antagonist, which is an AI human hybrid. And from that point, we then go into the second set of 3 books, which are going to be about the devastation that happens to that planetary system, and how my Wrecking Squad are in the middle of that, trying to stop it. It's been brilliant to write because I've loved doing the characters. I've loved that feel of interactive banter I can do in this, just to have people that have been on the same ship driving each other nuts for 3 or 4 years because they're hiding, suddenly thrust back into their old life and remembering why they and all the things that grow with that. But that's been great to write. It's been such a good feeling, and the reviews have been really good for that series. It's been really pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean I won't go back to fantasy, but it's just that's where my head is at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So we had a few people on here. We had Michael jump on. Hey, Michael, and also William. Both are saying the premise sounds awesome. They took the words right out of my mouth. It sounds so cool. I'm a huge Expanse fan. Love the Expanse. So Secret Time for the people that's on. I've never seen an episode of Firefly. I hear amazing things. I've never seen it. Never seen it. I hear it's like one of the best ever, but it's just it's one of those things. I didn't see it when it first came out, when everyone was talking about it, and then it's kind of been just haven't sat down. I probably need to go through and watch so I understand what Oh, I know, William. I know. I know. I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah, you're going to be sorry when you watch it and go, "Why have I not had this in my life for the last 15 years?" So yeah, it's just, it's yes, it's one of those series that does live with you, and it's the characters within that that make you could have it in just about anywhere. It's just how they are together, how it feels to watch the series and the film Serenity, which is a superb film. The whole thing fits really, really well, and that's the feeling I wanted. I love The Expanse. I love how that how it built from the crew being much wider thing.
Mhm.
And I also love that, and to a degree, I've adapted from that. You've got the real world physics, but also then you've got this something which is magical is the wrong word, but actually having something so
Mhm.
alien, so advanced that comes into it with the gates, that it feels that it almost takes all of that away and then
Mhm.
brings it all back again when you realize, yeah, you can go there, but then the physics are all going to be the same when you arrive. So yeah, there was some both of those series are superb, but I also like horror is not the right word, but that tinge of ick, which I would like, which I've added to it in terms of the aliens that we deal with, some of the experiments that have been going on.
So, you've written sci-fi, fantasy. Are there any other genres or themes or styles that you would like to explore in the future?
I've also I've written two, two standalone books, which were in the scorching. So basically, it's climate fiction's the wrong thing, but basically, if we keep going the way they are with the planet, where we'll be in 100 years, what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And then in my head, what would happen if aliens turned up and went, "Oh, we'll fix it. We'll sort it out for you." How
Mm-hmm.
would we react? What would we do as people? Um, and some of us would just carry on with doing what we're doing because somebody else is fixing it for us, and some people would be, well, they can't let the aliens come and do it. They're foreign people that have just suddenly arrived in our world, and how can we trust them? What are they going to do? Um, so I wanted to do something around that, just something completely off the wall, and also I wanted to write first person, which I've never done before. Everything I write is multiple point of view, third person. So that's why I went and took some time off, had an experiment with that. Wrote The World in My Hands, which is a sci-fi mystery book on two colony ships from two first-person point of views, and wrote Just Press Play, which is quite a strange buddy cop type book, where one of the buddies is a automated octopus. Don't ask me why, but it works. Of the books I sold today, that was the biggest seller. Um, it's just, but that is a really dark story. It's very dark. There's lots of humor because in the interplay between the two main characters. But yeah, I needed to go and write first person. I wanted to do something different. So that was my time away from this. They don't sell. Not many people buy them. When they do, it's what in England we would call Marmite. They absolutely love them or they hate them, and there isn't a grey area in between. It's just one of those things. But they help me grow as a writer, and I think that's the things that I need to do. I can't write things where I don't grow, where I don't develop myself. That's why the Wrecking Squad's been so good to write because I needed to have things where it's all going to go wrong, and it's not all going to be last minute escapes, and it's not all the people are going to be survivors. Ooh, that's a big hint for the last three books.
You heard it here first. You heard it here first. This is a spoiler.
Spoilers.
Spoilers. Spoilers. So, Nick, what is for you as a writer, as a human in this wild world? What is a goal of yours? And it doesn't have to be professional. Just curious on if there's a big goal that you would like
I
to
think,
achieve.
I think personally, you want people to enjoy your books. and I want as many people as possible to enjoy my books. But that's a selfish reason. I think in terms of that, and it's probably the teacher in me, I like to help. I'm far from the best writer in this world, but I like to help other writers where I can, and what goes, as they're developing, as they're emerging, to give feedback, to give structure, and to get it back myself. So that's something that I think is just natural in me. It's just to help other people as I go along. I mean, if I can help, I will. And obviously, if I can't, if I make things worse, which has happened, it's just like people come back and said, "Yeah, we're not going to do that," but then that's made me think of going in this direction. Um, it's just, I think, just part of my makeup. It's just how I am.
Awesome. So, final pitch to the people. People on and the people going through and watching during the replay. What kind of reader do you think is going to resonate most with the Dragon of the Veil, and why should they go through and pick it up?
So if you're looking for something that isn't going to immediately say this is the world, right? If you want to learn as you go, if you like a mystery intertwined with your dark fantasy, with the grimmer side of fantasy, but you still want light, you still want a bit of hope that's built in there. That's not everything is gonna fall down by the wayside. Then this is the book for you. So we've got that action element to it. You've got nuance in the politics that's going on. You've got characters that are lived in and real. So if that's the reader you want, if that's the type of book you want, then that's there. There's still the escapism, there's still the fantastical element to it, but there's also it's that grounded in the real, which I think if you can go with that, then you'll go with the books.
Awesome. Awesome. Nick, I really do appreciate you jumping on and talking with us about your fantastic worlds that you've gone through and built. And I'm super excited to not only continue the series, but jump into the Wrecking Squad. I know that's not our, the the book that got us to have this conversation, but I'm so intrigued by the premise for that book series. I'm gonna have to go through and get those. I'm gonna have to spend some money to go through and get those, to go through and watch those. So I really do appreciate it. Everyone that's on the chat, thank you so much for jumping on and listening to Nick talk about his fantastic stories. For everyone that's watching on replay, I really do appreciate all of you. And I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of their day, and make sure to keep reading and stay overbooked. I appreciate everyone. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.